So we're going to start in Ezra chapter 4 today. It says, "The enemies of Judah and Benjamin heard that the exiles were rebuilding a temple to the Lord, the God of Israel. So they approached Zerubbabel and the other leaders and said, 'Let us build with you, for we worship your God just as you do. We have sacrificed to him ever since King Esarhaddon of Assyria brought us here.' But Zerubbabel, Yeshua, and the other leaders of Israel replied, 'You may have no part in this work. We alone will build the temple for the Lord, the God of Israel, just as King Cyrus of Persia commanded us.' Then the local residents tried to discourage and frighten the people of Judah to keep them from their work. They bribed agents to work against them and to frustrate their plans. And this went on during the entire reign of King Cyrus of Persia and lasted until King Darius of Persia took the throne. Years later, when Xerxes began his reign, the enemies of Judah wrote a letter of accusation against the people of Judah and Jerusalem." The word of the Lord. Let me ask you, anybody ever heard the phrase, haters gonna hate? Does anybody know what that means? Some people, the phrase bewilders them because it is kind of a very recent addition to how we speak. The English language occasionally throws new things at us, and this is one of those things. Haters gonna hate. Negativity breeds negativity. That's getting there. How about this? No matter where you are in your life, if things are going good, somewhere, somebody is going to try to bring you down. You ever experienced that? Yeah. Well, guess what? This happens when we're being rebuilt too. So in our steps that we've been going through, God brings us hope. We see how He works before we know He's working. The next thing is that He restores communication. That was what the sacrifices at the altar were about. And then God lays the foundations for worship and rebuilding our life in worship of Him. And once all that's in place and things are chugging along and it seems like, man, life is outstanding. I can see the horizon clearly. I see this path that God has laid before me. And then somebody comes along and starts throwing rocks at your glass house. It seems to be the way that it happens, isn't it? Well, today in our scriptures we see three different types of people that come along into these moments. And we also see the way that God helps us to deal with them. And those may not be that evident at first, but I assure you, you will see them by the time we're done today. And the first people that like to come along, and I debated what to call them. It was either going to be tourist traps or detours, because kind of a similar thing can happen. Now, I don't know about you, but when I'm traveling, me and the slight ADD that I have, I will see something off to the side of the road that gets my attention. And guess what? It's time to pull over and check it out. Right? Anybody with me? No? Am I the only? Okay, I'm not the only one. I feel good now. Okay. My life is justified. But what do those things do for you when you're on a journey, a tourist trap? What do? They slow you down. They maybe get you off track. I've been to places where you go in and it tells you about all the local destinations around, and then instead of continuing on the journey you were on, you're like, oh, I got to go see this other thing. World's largest ball of twine? I'm in. Let's go.
It helps you spend your money.
It does, and it helps you drain your resources, doesn't it? Well, this first group of people that show up, that's kind of like what they do. Let's read here. It says, they approached Zerubbabel and the other leaders, and they said, "Let us build with you, for we worship your God just as you do. We have sacrificed to him ever since King Esarhaddon of Assyria brought us here." There's a problem hidden within that, and it sounds good, doesn't it? Let us help you. You ever heard that? Why don't you let me help you out of this problem you're obviously in, whether you know what the problem is or not, right? Now the problem here is that the people that were talking to them, they had been imported by the Assyrian king when he took over the northern kingdom of Israel. And they kind of mixed in with some of the population that had been left over, and so they were only really maybe sort of partially Jewish, maybe a little. And the problem with that is that God is very specific in this point when he's talking about his chosen people, about who it is allowed to conduct the worship of God. And because God is rebuilding his nation Israel, he has given a very specific vision to his people. And so these people who believe that they can worship God in this different place than God has specified come along and said, hey, we're just trying to live this life like you. Why don't you let us come alongside you and show you a few of the things that we do? Maybe kind of get you going over this way a little bit, because, you know, this thing that you're doing, it's great and all, but there's so much other stuff you can experience in this. You ever hear stuff like that? When you're in the process of being rebuilt by God, when your life is under construction, so to speak, then it's very important that you realize that God has a plan just for you. He has an outcome for your life that is a blessed and glorious thing. Now, in these moments, you may not know exactly what the end point looks like. I'm sure these people who were here, most of them had never seen the temple before, and they were trying to rebuild it. But they also knew that God had a very specific plan and a very specific calling, and the people that he had called together to help do this rebuilding were already there. So you got to look at your own life sometimes in the same way. Who are the people that God has called to be around you to help you rebuild? Because this passage, we could very easily say, well, God is doing this thing, I'm going to have to do it on my own. But no, that's not what it actually says. God is going to show you specifically who is going to help you rebuild your life, but there will also be those who try to help you get off track, to be tourist traps, so to speak. And they're going to sound good and friendly and helpful. Be aware of them. Now the next group of people, what did I call them? Speed bumps. Oh, let me point out the dog. The dog is pertinent to the last point. What is the dog trying to do? No, the dog's trying to help. Can the dog help, though? Is the dog equipped to help in this situation? No. The most help that dog can be is to keep your feet warm if they get cold. Okay? The dog can't help. It's actually hurting more than anything. The dog, keep in mind, is like the tourist trap, or that type of thinking. They want to help, and they may genuinely have a desire to help, but you may have to, at some point, help the dog realize that they need to go play elsewhere. That's one of the ways through the tourist trap is not to be mean about it. Sometimes you have to be a little firm, but to help them realize that God has a plan that you see, that you're following, and that you're going to continue on doing. And that's actually how they got through it. They said, you may take no part in this work, we alone will build the temple for the Lord, the God of Israel. Next group. Speed bumps. Oh, I despise speed bumps. I know what they're for. I know they're great. The parking lots are aggravating. And then they throw speed bumps out there, and now I have to, my Mustang is very low to the ground, and I have to creep up to it, and boom, 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 go 5 feet to the next one, ba-bump, ba-bump, ba-bump. People like me don't like speed bumps. It may come out here in a moment. When we're on our walk, though, with God and we're being rebuilt, God has a certain speed and trajectory at which He is doing it. Okay? We may not know what it is. Some of us want it to happen like that, don't we? But God knows what He's doing, I assure you. Whenever you're looking at how fast things are going, listen to God. Because not only do you want to go faster sometimes, or maybe slower, you run into these people. It says, then the local residents tried to discourage and frighten the people of Judah to keep them from their work. Woof. They bribed agents to work against them and to frustrate their plans. This is that second type of people. Whenever I was younger, 20 years old, getting ready to join the Army, I had been praying and I had been telling God I didn't want to join the Army. I really didn't want to join when I started feeling led to join. And I went to my pastor and was talking with him about it and praying with him about it. And he was like, you know what? I agree with you. I think maybe this is where God is calling you. Now, I was in a denomination at the time that was very much against people joining the military. And for him to say that kind of confirmed to me that, one, yes, this is God's plan for my life, but two, that this was a man who listened to God as well. So he and I were together on this. Well, once it kind of got out in the congregation that I was joining the military and I'd be going off into the service, and I'm going to say, honey, just calm down when I say this. A man in the congregation came up to me and said, you know, I was hoping you would stick around and marry my daughter. Is that not a bribe? Maybe. I can't remember, to tell you the truth.
Did you immediately take off?
I may have been looking for the door at that point. Honest with you, young man, 20 years old, who had been raised his entire life to be looking forward to marriage and was very happy about that possibility occurring at some point in his future. That was kind of a carrot being dangled out in front of me, and in a way it acts as kind of like this. I knew what God's plan for my life was. My pastor had been talking with me to help me confirm it, and then that pops up. A speed bump. Somebody that, and it talks about bribes, and that's kind of the way I kind of view it. It was kind of an enticement to maybe slow down, or could have been a redirect. But to be honest with you, take joy in the fact that there are people around you that can help you confirm God's direction for your life and the speed at which He is taking you there. And once you keep your hand on that, and you keep your eyes on it, and you're set in that direction, it'll help you recognize the other little things for what they are. Now, the way that they did it here is that they kept on working. They kept to what God had already been doing. They kept to the fact that there was a hope, that first step, right? They kept to the fact that God had restored communications with them in the sacrifice, the things that we call prayer and our sacraments, things of that nature. And then there was this foundation of worship that was being built. And they kept to those things. And that is what will get you through the speed bumps. Is keep to those things that God has laid out in your life to restore communication, to give you hope, and to worship Him. And in those things, you will discover what gets you through and past the speed bumps. And the last thing, swatters. Anybody confused by that word? Anybody know what swatting is? It's a new thing. Swatting. Any of the real young people know what it is. Okay, it's something that Tom Cruise and, let's see, Paris Hilton and Miley Cyrus and who else? What it is, somebody will call 911. Yes, you're starting to get it now. We'll call 911 and report something like a bomb scare at someone's house, or one real bad incident was somebody had a gun inside of Tom Cruise's residence and was holding the family hostage, and SWAT team showed up at Tom Cruise's house. Has done it like 3 times. Now, I'm not normally a big star watcher, but I tend to get weirded out by when people have to experience stuff like that. And it's called swatting. It's a thing. And so, yeah, this is something that really happens, like on a regular basis now. You know how laws always follow what society's trends are depending on the morality? Well, they're actually starting to craft laws now to address swatting because it's starting to become so regular. Now, swatting has a basis in some truth in the fact that, yes, Tom Cruise exists. Yes, he has a house. Yes, he has a family. It's all at this one address. However, it's ignoring one important fact, and that is there's no crazy gunman inside the house. Now, when we see that they wrote a letter to the king, let's see, who was it at the time? Xerxes. Years later, when Xerxes began his reign, the enemies of Judah wrote a letter of accusation against the people of Judah and Jerusalem. Anybody ever accuse you falsely of something? What? This is real bad for someone who is starting to rebuild their life, by the way. When everything is going good, when the old life is behind you and the new life is all laid out, and you're holding on to the edge of that and you're moving towards it, and then somebody comes along and they don't accuse you to your face. All these other people have been interacting with the people of Judah to their face. These accusers go to the people on the periphery that have some sort of influence in your life, and they say, yeah, this person was like this. Because if you go into the book of Ezra chapter 4 and you read these letters that they wrote to the kings, all they did was talk about how Judah was before they were destroyed. Before King Cyrus had been moved to bring them back to Israel to rebuild the temple. And that will happen to you. It'll be a horrible, dark time in your life, because it might even be people you don't even know who are watching your life on the outside. Suddenly God is blessing you, and then the problems in their life cause them to want you to not be happy, or to not be whole, or to not be healed. And it is probably the greatest example of evil that I can think of in the Christian life, because, folks, Christians do it too. We come to church, we have our lives, we have our issues, we have things that we deal with, and suddenly we see something that for some reason in our mind, it just doesn't click as right. We think that maybe somebody that has lived a life that has not been what we thought was right, and now suddenly God is blessing them and doing this wonderful thing. How dare they be healed when we've lived our entire lives trying to be sanctified and wonderful people, and now these people are going to be blessed? Let me tell you something. Jesus once told a parable, and the parable had to do with workers. And a vineyard owner goes out and he hires workers at the beginning of the day to start bringing in the harvest. And then about halfway through the day, he has to go out and get more workers because it's not going to happen fast enough. And then near the end of the day, really to get it pushed out, he goes out and he hires even more workers to come in. And everybody agreed to work for a certain price. And so at the end of the day, the owner, he's gotten the harvest in and the checks are being doled out, and everybody's getting the same amount, and it seems like it's unfair, but it's the price they agreed to work for. And Jesus' response to that moment is that, it's up to the agreement between the vineyard owner and the person that is called to do the work. God doles out the reward of eternity in heaven to everyone, and we need to get beyond any ideas of, I've tried to live a good life my entire life, and now this person over here is getting blessed. You need to lay that down right now in the name of Jesus. Because you know what? There is no greater joy than when we can come together and see the testimony of changed lives. There is no greater joy in that, because that is who we are supposed to be. We are supposed to be a people transformed by the blood of Jesus Christ. And that is how we can deal with the swatting, is by holding on to the fact that it's all about Jesus. And really that's what happened with these folks, because Xerxes, who by the way is the king of the story in Esther, for those of you that did the study in Esther, he actually listened to this letter. Artaxerxes is the son of Xerxes. Xerxes paid no attention to the letter. Artaxerxes paid attention to it, and he told him to halt the building. But then the next king came along, Darius, who lived in a different palace. And so when the letter came in to Darius, he had different archives to look in, and they found a decree by Cyrus that says, the king says, rebuild the temple of God in Jerusalem. And so Darius said, the kings before me have declared that this should happen. It's going to happen. And then Darius takes it a step further. Anyone that comes against this will find themselves and their families destroyed. Folks, we have to sometimes wait. We have to depend on the fact that God will bring out what He's doing in our lives. And God, if He is doing the transforming work in you, if somebody comes and says, well, this is who this person was before, depend on God to bring out the fact that He is doing something new, that He is making you new, a transformed person, because that's what happened in Israel. They just had to wait, though. They had to patiently wait and continue to move towards that rebuilding, sometimes on their own. But you know what? God got them through. And so I invite you to this week, meditate on that a little bit. Think about your tourist traps. Think about your speed bumps. But the dangerous ones you need to watch out for are the swatters. Don't let the swatters destroy your joy. You may have to step back from them. Let them do their thing. Don't pass judgment on them. Let God deal with them, because He will. And God will show His glory in your life as He's rebuilding it. Amen? Let's bow our heads.